Now, before we go adding more functionality to our game, I want to show you how to do a little bit of cleanup and optimization. It's nothing major. It's actually something relatively small that's not going to make a big impact, but it's a good habit to get into and something that I want you to learn right from the start. So let's open up our bird script one more time. And let's take a look at all of these things where we're saying get component rigid body, get component rigid body, get component rigid body. It's kind of littered throughout our code. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places where we're doing that so far. And this call, while it's not terribly slow, it's not the most efficient thing to do. And generally, when we're accessing components on a game object or in a script, we want to save them off and only get a reference to them once. We don't want to get a reference to them constantly. Now, when we're doing it in a mouse up type scenario or in a start scenario, it's not really a big deal. Again, there's no technical reason that you need to do this. And if you're running on a fast enough system, there may never be a technical reason that you need to do this. But it is a good habit and a good practice to get into, and it's called caching. We're going to cache our variable references or our component references and make it a little bit easier for the engine or our game to get a reference to them and use them later on. It also makes our code a lot easier to read because it's going to shorten things down and make it, I think, a little bit cleaner. So let's make that change now. The way that we're going to do it is take this little get component part right here on our line 12 where we get the rigid body, and we're going to replace that. We're going to replace it with a variable called rigid body in our class. To do that, I think what we'll do is type it in a little bit different. Instead of having it autocomplete and letting the editor do it this time, we'll manually type it in. So after line 7, I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to type rigid body 2D, and I'm going to put in a variable name. So I put a space, and I'm going to do underscore rigid body 2D. And I'm going to leave the casing matching, so I have an uppercase D and a lowercase r because this is one of my private fields in this class. It's a variable that's only accessible from inside this bird class. So now I have my rigid body 2D. I'm going to double click on it and copy it with Control C. And then I'm going to add in what we call an awake method. So I'm going to hit enter after line 9 and type awake. This is going to auto-generate it. I hit enter right after, so it auto-generated. But I'm going to double click on the private keyword and hit delete twice, and then paste in my word rigid body 2D. What I want to do here is get the reference to the rigid body 2D in this awake method. I'll show you what awake means in just a moment. First, let's type out the code. So we'll say rigid body 2D equals get component, and then we'll put in the type rigid body 2D, and then open close parentheses and a semicolon at the end to save that off. So what have we done here? We've saved off our reference to the rigid body so that we don't have to call get component on it every time. Again, get component, while it's not extremely slow, it's not the fastest thing ever. It does do some searching through our object to find this thing, and it's not cached, it's not the fastest. So what we're going to do now is replace all of our get component calls with this reference to the rigid body. So double click my rigid body, Control C to copy it if it wasn't already on my clipboard. Then I'll find my get component rigid body instances. Here's one of them. Select the whole thing, Control V to paste it. And I can do the same here. Select it all, Control V to paste it. You can also do a find and replace if you prefer to go that way, but I'm going to go through them manually so I can take a quick look at them all. The next one is in on mouse up, where we actually reference it 3 times. We get the component 3 times in a row, and we really don't need to do that. So I'm going to replace this first one here, just paste it in. And then these two, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to hold Alt, hold click, and then drag down here, and look at that. I can block select both of these sections. This works in Visual Studio and Writer and probably other editors. I'm going to hit Control V to paste, and look at that, it pastes over both of them. Pretty cool, right? Now I'm almost done, but I see the same thing with my sprite renderer. I'm getting a reference to it here. So I want to cache that as well. And I'm just going to go up to the top, do the same process here. Right after the rigid body, I'll say sprite renderer. Let's see if I can find it here. Oh, let's scroll down a couple more. Down arrow, by the way, to just go through these. So sprite renderer underscore sprite renderer. Oh, I got to go back. So I'm going to hit Control left arrow underscore end semicolon. There we go. Get that sprite renderer typed out. Double click on it and copy it with Control C, then paste, and equals get component sprite renderer. Open close parentheses and the semicolon. There we go. So now we've got our sprite renderer cached. It's still on my clipboard, so I'm just going to find the 2 instances where we're using it. Here's one of them, and paste it in. And where was that other one? Right here. And paste it in. So now we are caching our variables. Let's scroll or zoom out a little bit and see what that looks like. So we've got rigid body, sprite renderer, and a start position. These two are components, and this one's just a position or a vector that we're saving off. I'm going to save my code, and then let's talk about awake.